A very strong, clear memory for me was the last night before we sent Unsettled files. And Mark and I were at the office until like 5 a.m. It was this like stay until it's done day. And we'd been doing really long days the week preceding, the year preceding really, but these were, instead of 15-hour days, they were, 18, 20-hour days. And then this day we're literally not leaving till we're done. And we were at the office. It was morning. It was like dawn, basically. And we had that like hot and freezing and sound feels weird, like total exhaustion thing going where the world is just this nether world that you exist in. And Mark was doing all the file prep, which, if you don't know, takes an unbelievable amount of time. And it was just a cool experience. Like, it was just, we were here late. It felt very much like we are at the end of this thing. Like, it had been this very long, exhausting journey. And it was like one of those rare moments in life where, like, this is the transition point. It ends today. And it felt appropriately big.
And you broke into musical song and dance.
A little bit.
And
it actually, though, like the moment, like the pressure and excitement and weirdness of the moment facilitated a lot of cool things that actually made it into the game. Like, I read through the survival tasks for all the planets that last night and read through all the narrative, and it just felt a little like it needed to be looser. Like, I felt like the soul of it is there, but it just needs to like shake its shoulders out a little bit and feel a little more like full of vibrancy. And like at like 4 a.m., I rewrote almost every piece of narrative in all the survival tasks. And it was almost like the entire 2-year period preceding it was just warm up. And then I did all of that work that night. And like, all of my favorite pieces of writing in the game happened in that evening. Like, if you have laughed out loud at something in Unsettled, I almost guarantee you it was written at 4:30 a.m. on the final day.
Through delirium.
And like
the montage playing in the background.
Yeah, and it just was fun. And I actually felt proud and not stressed of what we were doing, which isn't always the case for me. And it was just a very, very cool day.
That's beautiful.
I'm living it again in my head right now. That was a heavy week, and there was a lot of strain. But you're right. There was this burden lifted that had to do with the culmination of years of work coming together and feeling like we're really over the top of that now. And it was a huge effort, and that was like the climactic moment for it. And we've had other moments associated with that too, but
not everything gets a legitimate climactic moment, though. That was cool.
I have 2 short ones to share, and they're both from old school Orange Nebula. Like Orange Nebula 1.0. It's like, I will say the first one is when the in-between when we canceled the first Kickstarter and started the second, and I put together this, like, I don't know. You know me. I did a little ritual, there was lockers and bags.
Just sacrifices and candles.
There was lockers and bags full of like old components that were used during playtesting over the years. And so I kind of pulled out all of these old components and I set them up on Mark's back patio. And I like kind of just set up this scene to show like the years of work that had gone into this. And I did light a little candle and I wrote a little note, and Mark and I both sat out there and just kind of made some intentions about just the amount of work that had gone into it to this point, and just letting go of expectations from that point and just letting it, whatever would come next, if this was our second attempt at doing a Kickstarter, whatever would come next, we would accept and be grateful and happy for. And I felt like that letting go before that next launch was a very powerful moment for us.
And quite honestly, that was a teaching moment for me. Like, that felt to me like I had so much invested in this from a personal perspective, to sit out there and have somebody else basically give me permission or remind me to give myself permission to just let it go and just release this creative thing into the world and let it fall where it was going to fall was new for me at the time. And that there was a huge, sigh of relief during that I think was important for me. So yes, I remember that very vividly.
And then the second one is just like a matter of a few weeks later, as we get into that Kickstarter and we hit the first 100,000 and we're like sending each other selfies like, this is amazing. And then as we get close to the last closing day, and all of a sudden it ramps up and we hit 200 that day, and our endorphins were just off the charts, right? And we're like sitting, I don't know, those of you who were there back then, you probably remember this. We did like a closing ceremonies live stream, just Mark and I. And we were sitting there, and we thought that the campaign closed an hour earlier than it actually did. And so we're sitting there doing this closing live stream saying, well, we've got 5 more minutes. And then we start seeing the comments come in that are like, that's so cute. They think it's only 5 minutes, and it's an hour and 5 minutes. So we then had to sit there on the couch and entertain for another hour.
Yep. I remember that too.
And that I've got a screenshot of us just laughing hysterically from that live stream that like totally encompasses the power of that moment. The first real kind of success of this campaign coming after canceling the one before and doing this kind of prep ritual before letting go and letting whatever happened happen. It kind of closed that circle.
Which is still terrifying, because what happens is then you fund for something that people haven't actually played or used yet. And so it's just like, oh crap, I hope everybody likes this. But yeah, that was a big moment. I remember jumping up and down on couches at the end, and like that was, boy, culmination of years of work though. You can't help but be emotional. And I have no regrets about any of that stuff.
For me, it was this last Kickstarter for Vindication last year about this time, and doing the exercises with the community, creating the sketches that would turn into the cards for the community pack, and getting to see all the votes, all the creative names and titles, and then all the stories in the comments, just like long, incredibly inventive, well thought out stories about these characters, and then getting to immediately bring them to life and know that they're going to be a part of this pack that everybody was a part of. It was just so invigorating, and so much like energy right there in the moment.
Isn't it amazing? You spend so much of your time kind of siloed in your creation process that to open it up that way and have this immediate feedback is such a different experience than what you normally are doing.
Absolutely. And it made me realize how much I really like that, because I am kind of a hide in the shadows and draw creature. And so realizing that, wow, this can be a thing that immediately impacts other people, that immediately sparks their imagination, was just incredible.
Well, it's really fun to see, like you do a sketch that takes an hour and you put it out there, and then how much people pour story into that sketch, and now that sketch, that image lives in 100 different realities now as being this different thing for different people that they're attached to, and that like all of that was spawned by this cool mashup of your imagination and their imagination sort of coming together to make a thing. That's very exciting.
It gives it so much life.
What do you got, Mark? Can you pull it? Can you pull anything specific?
It's a journey. There's milestones. I have milestones with all of you. I was thinking to myself, none of the real memorable moments that I have at Orange Nebula are me with my sketchbook or with my computer or engineering or designing or making products. They always have like one of you in it. Like it's always like there's another human interaction. I'm thinking to myself, almost all of it is the people who are in the trenches, doing the work. And, a lot of it just is, it gets deeper the harder it is, right? The more difficult and arduous the journey, the more rewarding and the higher the high moments are. So yeah, I mean, I've got half a dozen with every single person in the company that I think are memorable. I don't even really think about Orange Nebula products as much as I think about Orange Nebula as a living organism. And so most of it is how we're all kind of inspiring and unlocking each other.
Yeah, there's a familial thing going on. Like, I'm just going to take this somewhere else for a minute.
Okay.
What is definitely my strongest, clearest, most powerful moment with the company is... I'm sorry, we're now suddenly going there.
Yeah.
Early on in the company, before we really had a public face that people could interact with, we were a 4-person team, 5-person team, and one of those people was a woman named Mel. And you all didn't have the opportunity to know Mel because Mel passed away. And, it would take a very long time of us just going off to encapsulate how special Mel was, but just accept that that's how we feel about Mel. And there was a day that we were all in the office, and Mel always came to work around the same time, and she wasn't there, and it was like, that's very unusual. And by 30 minutes later, it was like, okay, something is wrong. Like, this is not, Mel is not late to things. And then, a couple hours later, like, we just understood, like, something terrible has happened. Whatever we end up hearing about what has happened, it's bad. And so, like, we just tried to go through a day, but everyone was distracted. And then sort of the go home time came, and like, Mark and I just couldn't leave. Like, it just felt like we couldn't go home. Like, we had this unanswered question about this member of our family, and so we just stayed. And it turned into the night, and we were in Portland at the time, and we walked over the bridge, and we just sort of like milled around, and it was dark out, and we went and we sat and we got pizza at some random fancy pizza place. And we didn't even really talk that much. Like, normally Mark and I are scheming and dreaming and have 1,000 things to talk and argue and whatever about, but we were just sort of together. And we knew that, when tomorrow came, we were going to have some piece of bad news. But we also knew that, like, we couldn't end the night. Like, we just couldn't go home. And because it felt in a way like we were abandoning our friend or our family to go home. Like, and, and so Mark and I just sort of shared that moment together. And, Derek was with us too at that time, so it was like, and it just really, obviously that's a very, and the next day we found out that she had passed away in her sleep. She was in her 20s, this is a very surprising thing. But, it was this, obviously it's a heavy, big memory for that reason, but it also exists in my mind as this moment when it really clicked that, like, we are a family, and it's not just this business of us making things. Like, we do share something so much deeper in this group, and I feel like that has continued as the group has grown. We have 9 people here now. If someone didn't show up for work, it would feel the same way because there's a special atmosphere going on in the office. And I feel like that became a mix of abundantly evident that day, but I feel like it was almost like founded that day. Like, we need to be about each other in a way that transcends the work. And, like, there will be nothing that this company does that's not going to be influenced by that day for the entire rest of the time the company exists. It was a very...
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about that too. I'll try to keep it brief. My first natural responses to that when Mel passed were, life sucks. This is part of the crap we have to go through.
Fair.
It's not fair. The deeper reflection afterwards is life is so amazing. Like, we have to make it count, and we have to make the journey count. It doesn't matter where we're going and what we want ahead. It's about what we're doing right now. It's about the time that we have, and you know, respecting each other and building community and family. And so, yeah, that was a really gelling moment for us. Like all of us having go through such a small team, losing someone so young, so unexpectedly, you know, and I think that's the effect someone close to you passing has. But here it did solidify some type of foundational character or resolve or something that said there has to be depth to what we're doing that goes beyond doing this for money, right? And we decided, I think, from the beginning, but we decided specifically at that point, we're never going to put something out that we're not proud to have our name hanging on it. So that was a cool moment in that perspective. Tough time, solidified us and made us better and stronger.
Are there any other just pieces that you want to share from what's felt most powerful to you before we move on to our main topic?
There's so many, you know, it's like in some ways Orange Nebula has just been, it's bigger than me, right? But in some ways I feel like it's my child at the same time. And you look at your children and they have their own personality and they kind of go their own way sometimes and they're a little unruly sometimes. And sometimes they're so adorable you want to hug them. And I feel like Orange Nebula is that way for me. I love it so much. And it's because of the people that are in it and the personalities. And, you know, I'm not going to remember the projects and the numbers later. I'm going to remember the people and the moments later. And even this, you know, I'm going to look back and be like, remember that video cast stuff that we were doing, that podcast stuff that we were doing? That stuff matters. And it makes up, you know, the chapters of our life. And I don't know if I can really piece out one or two, aside from the ones we've talked about. I know I could, actually. I know I could probably do 30 of them. But the whole, I mean, I feel like if I was to go back and give myself advice, I would say get into a situation like this sooner.
Remember when we went to that Gen Con and we recorded that 5-hour podcast we've still never published?
Yes.
And we were just dragging like 70 feet of cables behind us as we walked all around like downtown Indianapolis.
Yes.
And everyone was looking at
amateurs.
It was
Yeah.
awesome. But that's what was funny about it.
I know.
What if we just dragged all this crap down the street?
And we did.
And we did. And it was awesome. And people mocked us. And that was even better.
It was mock-worthy.
Mhm.
It was.
It was. We've lived mock-worthy lives.